At the dining table, Caleb Monroe's cool, refined voice was the first to break the silence. "You're not wearing your ring today." I froze for a second, then instinctively glanced down at my hand. The skin around my finger still bore a faint pale mark from years of wearing that ring, yet the ring itself was gone without a trace. "Must have taken it off while washing vegetables and forgot to put it back on," I said softly. Out of habit, my thumb brushed against my bare skin, warm, soft, and unfamiliar without the familiar weight of the band. I hesitated, then added, "I'll go get it." Pushing back my chair, I rose to head toward the kitchen. "Forget it. It's nothing important," Caleb said faintly, lowering his gaze as he picked up his chopsticks again. I stopped in my tracks. Those words, "nothing important," dragged me back to memories I had long tried to bury. Those rings, I had spent 43 days designing them, pouring myself into every detail, and now to him, they were meaningless. My eyes fell to his hand. There, on his finger, was a ring, but it wasn't ours. "The 5 days we agreed on this month, I've fulfilled them," Caleb continued, voice as indifferent as ever. "I won't be coming back again this month, otherwise he'll be upset." I turned my head away, refusing to look at him, refusing to hear what that sentence truly meant. "I'll just go find my ring," I murmured. He didn't answer. He only watched me with that expressionless face, so cold, so detached, as though he were watching some cheap stage play, bored by my performance. Almost as if to say, "Haven't you had enough yet?" And yet, I remembered. The day I had revealed those rings to him like a magician pulling treasure from thin air. Caleb had not been this cold. He'd tried to act composed, but the tips of his ears had betrayed him, burning red. When I slid the ring onto his finger, I had seen it, the faint tremor of his hand. Back then, I thought he loved me. That he had chosen me, Adrian Vale, the one who lived quietly in the shadows, rather than the countless bright stars who surrounded him. But later, I learned the truth. I had been mistaken. His love had never belonged to me. The weight lifted from my shoulders all at once, leaving only a hollow weariness in its place. Quietly, I sat back down and lowered my head to eat. A few moments later, Caleb set down his chopsticks with a faint clatter. "I'm done." His tone was laced with impatience. "I'll head back now." "Today isn't over yet," I said before I could stop myself. He frowned. "What?" I let out a small sigh, staring at my bowl. "This afternoon, come with me to the hospital." Ever since I forced Caleb Monroe into signing that partner contract, our relationship had spiraled downward. In the beginning, he still spoke to me, short sentences, fragments of conversation. But later, all he ever gave me was that wary look, like even words were too much of a burden. Under his deliberate silence, our communication withered away. It was me, clinging to him with all I had, forcing myself into the smallest corner of his world, just to keep some fragile thread of connection. I held on for so long that the thorns pierced so deep they became part of me. I couldn't tell if the pain I felt was my body's cry for relief, or simply the wound he left inside me. Either way, it reminded me I was still alive, and so I stopped asking him to stay. Stopped begging, stopped making a scene. He blinked at me, almost startled. "What's wrong with you?" he asked. For the first time in a long while, he sat back down at the table, suspicion flickering in his eyes as he studied me. "Lately, I've been getting these sharp headaches," I said casually, brushing it off. But the truth was, it wasn't just that. I'd started forgetting things. Little things at first, what I'd eaten, where I'd put something. Sometimes hours later, the memory would come rushing back like a cruel joke. Other times I'd forget which foods I couldn't eat, only to choke them down and throw them up again. It was getting worse. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to see a doctor. Caleb was silent for a moment before he finally nodded. "All right, I'll go with you this afternoon." "Thank you," I said, smiling faintly. My voice was calm now, no longer laced with the desperate hysteria that used to cling to me. He lowered his gaze, turning his face slightly to the side. He murmured. The sunlight poured over him then, soft and golden. He was still beautiful, always. "Have you told your family about this?" he asked after a pause. I shook my head. "There's nothing to tell." "You know," he said quietly, a trace of warmth softening his tone, "they do care about you. Between family, there's no wall that can't be crossed." A hint of a smile touched his lips. I knew exactly who he was thinking of. When someone speaks of the person they love, their eyes glow, their entire expression softens. For him, that person was my brother who was also an adopted son in the family. And yet, my mother's love had always been divided fairly with him, while I was left with nothing. I stared at Caleb in silence, and for the first time, I didn't argue back. He drove me to the hospital. I opened the passenger side door and was about to get in, but Caleb Monroe stopped me. "Sit in the back," he said, curt and decisive. I glanced at the front seat. A small piece of paper was taped there. On it was written, "Simon Vale's seat only." My brother's name. I understood immediately. And yet my face burned with embarrassment and pain. Clearly, Caleb and I had signed a partner contract. Yet somehow, in this moment, I felt like a third party. The surge of conflicting emotions hammered inside my head, splitting my thoughts into shards. Cold sweat ran down my forehead. The world spun, tilting sideways, and I struggled to stay upright, instinctively reaching for support. Caleb's expression shifted sharply. He swatted my hand away and raised his voice. "I said sit in the back. Can't you understand human language?" Without anything to hold on to, I stumbled. For a heartbeat, I almost fell to the ground. Finally, Caleb seemed to notice something was wrong. He stepped toward me, an instinct to help flickering in his eyes, but then he stopped himself. He remained standing there, arms at his sides, observing. "Are you okay?" he asked, as if he didn't already know the answer. The young man who used to fuss over every scraped knuckle, who would nervously bandage my tiny cuts, now he stood there, distant, indifferent. Time had changed him, and time had changed me. I gritted my teeth through the sharp pain and shook my head. "I'm fine." I climbed into the back seat alone. Some small piece of myself, seemed to be slipping away. I tried to grasp it, tried to remember, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't bring it back. The car moved steadily along the quiet street. Several times, Caleb Monroe glanced at me through the rearview mirror, opening his mouth as if to speak, but then stopping himself. I didn't say a word either. I simply stared out the window, letting the world pass by. Suddenly, the car came to a halt. "Hey, Simon!" Caleb's voice rang clear, warm and urgent, reaching my ears. "What? Is it serious? How could you be so careless?" His tone shot up in panic. "I'm coming. Don't move." Then his eyes fell on me, and just like that, he froze. Hesitation and guilt flickered in those sharp, hawk-like eyes. I stayed silent. After a moment, he let out a slow sigh. I should have just taken a taxi. I thought this, but didn't move, just watched him. Was I waiting for him to really hurry off? Was it stubbornness? Or resentment? I wasn't sure. "I'm sorry, Adrian," he said finally. "Simon had a little accident. I need to go check on him. You take a taxi for now. Once the hospital visit is done, I'll come get you." He turned toward me, his expression slightly complicated, speaking as if negotiating seriously with someone he thought might refuse. I simply nodded, said nothing more. Silently, I stepped out of the car. He froze, perhaps shocked at how easy I had been to persuade. Caleb opened his mouth, then paused, eyes flickering. Finally, he said, "I'll come get you after your checkup." A promise, meant for me. My head ached even more. I didn't respond. I simply lowered it and began calling for a taxi. There weren't many people around, so it might take some time to get one. Caleb opened his mouth again, as if he wanted to say something, but then, in the end, he stayed silent. He started the car and drove off, leaving me standing there, alone. A tearing pain woke me. I shot my eyes open. My dream had been chaotic, heart-pounding, leaving me gasping. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, still trembling slightly. "No serious damage. Mood shouldn't fluctuate too much." I heard the doctor's voice. Squinting, I looked toward the doorway. A tall, thin young man leaned slightly forward, his fine black hair partially covering a pair of striking peach-colored eyes. He listened carefully to the doctor's instructions. So young, almost like a high school student. A hearing aid hung from one ear, suggesting he had some difficulty hearing. His clothes were faded from washing, yet clean. His family might not be wealthy, but his diligence in life showed through. And that face, I truly liked it. "I understand. Thank you, doctor." The young man turned, and our eyes met. Joy flickered in his gaze. He hurried over to me. "You're awake?" Ah, I remembered. I didn't know what had happened, only that I had fainted in the middle of the street. I tried to recall, but the memory refused to come. I let it go. The last thing I remembered before waking was this young man's face. It seemed he had brought me to the hospital. "My lifesaver," I said, grasping his hand gratefully. He jumped, a faint pink coloring his fair cheeks in an instant. Flustered, his voice changed slightly. "I just happened to be passing by. Don't be afraid. You've already paid the fees." "Thank you. I'm Adrian Vale. I'll add you as a friend and transfer the money to you," I said. The boy bit his lip nervously, trying subtly to pull his hand away. but he didn't. When he looked up and met my intense gaze, he quickly dropped his head, voice tight, thick eyelashes fluttering like nervous butterflies. "Please, speak slowly. I can't hear clearly." He gestured to the hearing aid at his ear. "Sorry," he added, apologizing to me in reverse. "I was caught off guard. It's okay. It's okay," I said, smiling faintly. I shook my head, slowed my speech, pointed to my phone, and repeated my words. "Adrian Vale." He carefully enunciated my name, then curved his eyes into a shy smile. His voice was soft and clear. "I'm Ethan Alaric. The money, you don't need to worry about it. You looked unhappy at the time. I just wanted to see you happy." Ethan Alaric spoke to me, a complete stranger, with an unexpectedly sincere blessing. I didn't know why, but my eyes warmed, tears rolled down my face. In his startled gaze, I let them fall freely, expressionless yet overwhelmed. "It's nothing. I'll be fine in a little while," I whispered. He didn't speak. Instead, he handed me a tissue, quietly sitting by my side, and stayed. I had been invisible in my family for as long as I could remember. At first, I tried to earn even the tiniest bit of attention. I studied hard. I brought my test papers to my mother, one that was only 5 points shy of a perfect score. The teacher asked for a parent's signature. My mother glanced at it, cold and indifferent, and said, "Your brother and sister always get full marks. Signing this would be embarrassing. Adrian, have Mrs. Wong sign it for you." I even tried running away from home, but I only managed to sit at the gate of another villa. They could have found me easily if they'd looked, but they didn't. A whole day passed like that. At night I returned home, disheveled and weary. They were all there, happily eating dinner together. Not a single person looked up at me. It wasn't hatred that cut the deepest. It was indifference. Even more hopeless was that I still didn't understand. Why did they dislike me so much? Was it my unremarkable appearance, or my intelligence so clearly inferior to my brother and sister? I had believed that if I tried hard enough, one day I could earn my parents' recognition, their love, until Simon Vale came into my life. He was adopted by my parents. They even gave him a new name. My brother and sister welcomed him eagerly, poring over dictionaries with our parents, picking beautiful names, consulting masters to calculate the perfect one. Finally, they chose Simon Vale. And my name? Adrian Vale. I had assumed my naming would be the same process. Until that day when they named Simon, my mother used my own name as an example of what not to do. She said she had never liked me, even before I was born. If her body had allowed it, I would have been aborted. I had caused her to nearly brush with death, and yet naming me took only a minute. Adrian Vale. Just Adrian. I ran back to my small, cramped room, head down, wiping away my tears. No one cared if I was happy, until Ethan Alaric told me something. He said, "I want you to be happy." A simple blessing, a gift I had been denied for 26 years of my life. The hospital said it was a psychosomatic reaction, my body responding to the trauma I had suffered. The shock had been so severe that my body had triggered its own defense mechanism. No one could say if my memory would return or when it might. I propped my cheek in my hand, half bored, half curious, listening to the medical staff chatter. I felt all right. Most of my memories seemed intact. Only a few fragments were missing. It was obvious the gaps wouldn't affect my speech or daily life. I glanced at Ethan Alaric. He sat there, completely focused, jotting down every single instruction the doctor gave him into his little notebook. "Honestly, young man, you don't have a friend who cares about their health like this," the doctor teased with a smile. I lowered my head, knowing I had no right to argue. Ethan shifted awkwardly, a faint blush on his cheeks. "I just want to remember what's important," he said quietly. Even with some memory loss, certain things were etched into my DNA. A man standing 1.83 meters tall. I wasn't exactly a tough guy, and I wasn't as tall as Ethan, but I wasn't some sweet, fragile type either. The doctor understood and said nothing more. After getting my prescription and seeing that nothing serious was wrong, they said I could leave. "You heading home?" Ethan and I left the hospital together. I nodded, pulling out my phone and scanning for nearby hotels. "I guess I don't remember where home is," I said quietly. I didn't want to go back to the old family estate. My subconscious warned me that if I returned, the constant reminders would drive me mad. A week there, and my memory might as well go back to elementary school. "I'll add you as a friend and transfer the money to you," I said. Over $400. I couldn't stiff someone who had been so kind. Ethan stubbornly pursed his lips. keeping his head down as he walked ahead. "I need to pay you back," I called, quickening my pace to catch up. I tugged at his coat. "Ethan!" He stopped. When he looked down at me, his long lashes drooped in the most pitiful, guilty way, like a scolded, oversized dog. I rubbed my temple, frustrated. "I'm giving you the money now." He pointed at his ear, looking confused. I glanced over. Ah, his hearing aid was gone. He had manually switched it off. "I can't hear," he said matter-of-factly. "Adrian?" A familiar, but also strange voice sounded nearby. I frowned and looked. Two men stood there. One I recognized, the other a stranger. The familiar one was my adoptive brother. Because of him, I had suffered quite a bit at home. But now, thinking carefully, most of those memories were fuzzy, the pain fading into insignificance. The other was a handsome man, dark-faced and unfamiliar. And yet, my heart twisted painfully the instant I saw him. So strange. Why did seeing them make me so uneasy? They noticed me, of course. I fumbled, trying to act as if I hadn't seen them. I turned, clutching Ethan's hand, hoping to quickly leave this place of trouble. "Adrian, where do you think you're going?" The dark-faced stranger ran forward, blocking my path, relentless. Ethan sensed something was wrong, put his hearing aid back in, and positioned himself between me and the man. Protective. "Who is he you're letting a—" The man's eyes, sharp and disdainful, scanned Ethan. "Let a deaf guy accompany you to the doctor? Does the doctor have to accommodate sign language for him too?" Before his words had even finished, my hand came down. The slap rang clear, sharp enough to hush the world around us. I lowered my eyes and flexed my wrist. I had hit harder than I expected, and the palm of my hand tingled from the force. And inside me there was an eerie calm, strangely satisfying, like a cold, small victory. "If I ever hear your friends speak that way again, I'll beat you both," I said, my voice flat and detached. I gave Simon Vale a single, indifferent glance, then turned and took Ethan Alaric's hand, walking him toward the exit. "Adrian, are you insane? Do you even know who you just hit?" Simon scolded, brow knotted. The man I'd struck stood frozen, clutching his face, eyes wide, apparently too stunned to register that I'd actually hit him. "Where are you going?" he cried, voice trembling with disbelief, breaking like a poor note in the wind. "What I do is none of your business." I answered without looking back. "Take another step and I'll tear up our contract," he shouted, hysteria sharpening each syllable. I stopped, finally turning to look at the frantic young man before me. For reasons I couldn't name, disappointment rose in my chest. "Fine, be my guest. I'd welcome that," I said, calm as a closed door. Then I left the hospital with Ethan at my side. No backward glance. Outside, I noticed Ethan's earlobe flushed bright red. Only then did I loosen my grip on his hand. "Sorry," I muttered. "It's okay," he said, reaching up to ruffle my hair. The warmth of his fingers on my scalp was comforting in a way nothing else had been. He opened his arms, soft and natural. "I think you need a hug. I'll give you one." "Don't be so good to me," I said, turning my face away. I swallowed the bitter feeling in my chest and spoke quietly. "I'm not a very good person." Because I wasn't worth it. I was the shadow beneath the family's feet, the unlucky star who shouldn't at the table of a happy home. A scrap of paper appeared against my palm. Ethan had pressed it into my hand, paper dense with neat, earnest notes. "You're adorable, Adrian. Live for yourself. Take care of yourself," it read. Then he left. He took neither money nor contact. He simply left. I watched his retreating figure until it was only a shape, and the paper in my hand felt hot, almost as if it were burning into my palm. I pressed it over the left side of my chest. It burned there. Live for myself? Was I even capable of it? I was temporarily staying at a friend's place. A lawyer friend. His name was Harold Zoe. So? His voice was calm, almost lazy, as he pushed his glasses higher up the bridge of his nose. He sat on the sofa, flipping through a law book so thick it might as well have been a brick. "Got into a fight with that special someone at home?" He didn't even look up as he spoke. "You know," he added with a faint smile, "staying here isn't free." I let my tired body sink deeper into the soft cushions of the sofa. "How much is your rent per month?" "We'll split it." That got his attention. He finally looked up at me. "If you leave early, I'm not refunding you." "I never asked you to," I muttered. "And as for that special someone you're talking about, I don't even remember who that is anymore." I tossed the hospital report onto the coffee table. Harold picked it up and read it carefully. After a moment, his brows drew together. "In that case," he said, his tone steady but pointed, "it's time you did what you should have done long ago, while your head's still clear. He rose, disappeared into his study, and returned with a file folder. From it, he pulled out a document and slid it across to me. Take a good look. 2 signatures were on it. Mine. And someone named Caleb Monroe. The terms made my stomach twist. It promised him resources, money, opportunities. In exchange, all I asked for was his love. Line after line. This wasn't a contract. It was a pitiful covenant. A binding of desperation. The echo of someone's foolish, bleeding heart. I caught myself pressing at my finger, half expecting the familiar bite of a ring. But there was nothing there. Only skin, warm and bare. When I reached the final page, I saw the only clause that brought me the faintest relief. I could end it at any time. All it required was a lawyer's notice, given to Caleb 1 week in advance. The Vale family might have neglected me most of the time, but what slipped through their fingers, even if scraps, was still wealth enough to buy a man's future. Enough to hand an ambitious soul like him a ticket into high society. I don't remember this man, I said finally, my voice steady. So please, Harold, cancel it. Recording finished, came the cold chime of a mechanical voice. Harold held up his phone, a small, wry smile tugging at his lips. You said it yourself? Don't blame me if your memory comes back and you regret it later. I gave a soft, helpless laugh. I may have lost some memories, but I'm not the kind of person who goes back on his word. In most things, no, he agreed, tapping the contract with his finger. Except when it comes to him. Him? I shook my head. I don't believe that. How could I? I knew what kind of man I was, ordinary, overlooked, unloved. Everything I ever did, I left myself an escape route. The moment I felt the faintest rejection, I would turn, retreating before the door shut in my face. Even this contract bore my caution. I'd given myself an exit. So how could I have ever loved anyone so recklessly, so utterly without reserve? Harold's gaze lingered on me, thoughtful, almost searching my face for the man I used to be. Unethical as it may be to say this, he murmured at last, I think losing your memories might not be such a bad thing. I met his eyes in silence. He smiled faintly, lifting his glass in a mock toast. It could be a new beginning. My son won't be home tonight. How about we share a drink? Harold Zhao came to me with news. The notice has already been delivered to Caleb Monroe, he said quietly. He wants to see you. I lowered my gaze to the book in my hands, my tone calm but distant. Let's not. All right, Harold nodded without surprise, then added almost casually, there's really nothing worth seeing anyway. He looks very calm. As he should be, I replied, voice even. From the way you've described him, it's clear he never really cared about me. Harold tilted his head, considering me for a moment. Still, there was a time, a long while ago, when things weren't so bad between you two. The way he said it, I could feel he was about to drift into a story, nostalgic, maybe even sentimental. I quickly raised a hand to stop him. That's over now, isn't it? My voice was steady, though inside I felt the faintest tremor. If we're being honest, the time we spent hurting each other far outweighed whatever happiness there might have been back then. I think it's time I let go. Besides, I don't have the slightest intention of keeping anything between us going. And yet, my chest felt strangely hollow, as though some invisible scalpel had cut something out of me, clean and precise, leaving behind an emptiness I couldn't ignore. I could sense it, faintly, like something just beyond a fogged window. But that was all, just the awareness. Nothing more. Harold gave a small chuckle. Fair enough, then let's leave it at that. He didn't push the matter further. Instead, his expression shifted as he leaned back, his voice lighter now. Oh, by the way, he said, as though remembering something, since you've just been idling around at home, I went ahead and found you some work. Caleb Monroe had a dream. It had been so long since he'd dreamed at all. In it, a waning moon hung in the sky, spilling pale light over a quiet night. He stretched out his hand toward a boy, curled up in the shadows. In that instant, time froze. The boy's fragile outline froze with it. It was a lucid dream. Caleb could see everything clearly. He was staring at his younger self. On that boy's face were fresh wounds, still seeping blood. He had come from far away, just to wait outside a glittering banquet hall, just to see the one he liked walk past, just to give him a single flower. That rose, it was the most beautiful one he could find, bought with every last coin he had. But he waited, and waited. No message ever came. No one came out to meet him. In the end, the younger Caleb sighed and turned to leave. That was when he saw another boy, not far away, crouched in the shadows as well. A boy his age. Adrian Vale. Those eyes, so clear, so bright, yet carrying a sadness that couldn't be named. like a heavy fog caught behind the gaze. Caleb didn't know why, but he was drawn to those eyes, so he slowed his steps, quietly moving closer. "It's so late. Aren't you going home?" he asked. Back then, he hadn't noticed. But now, in the dream, he realized his voice had been so soft, like he was afraid of startling a frightened creature. Adrian's eyes widened in surprise, but he said nothing. Instead, he shrank further into the shadows, his gaze fixed stubbornly on the bright villa lights in the distance. "Have you eaten?" Caleb tried again, his voice careful. "Don't be scared. I'm not a bad person." He crouched down beside him. "Are you waiting for someone to come out too?" "That's my home." Adrian's voice was quiet. At the time, Caleb had thought Adrian was just fighting with his family. So after a pause, he offered the rose. "This flower is beautiful. You look unhappy, so I want to give it to you." His eyes curved as he smiled. "Beautiful things. They always bring comfort. I hope this flower will make you happy." In the dream, it unfolded exactly as it once had. It was because of this flower Caleb knew that Adrian's heart had stirred. Because of this flower, so much turmoil had followed between Adrian and Simon Vale. But in the dream, Caleb's heart turned cold. "Don't do it," he told himself cruelly. "Don't hand him the flower. Don't let Adrian be moved." He should have torn that rose apart, thrown it away, never given it to Adrian at all. Without that moment, without that spark, he would have been with Simon long ago. Adrian Vale was stubborn, ordinary-looking, awkward, and maddeningly persistent. Caleb Monroe had told him so many times, learn from Simon Vale, mend your ties with the family, stop being so hard-headed. But Adrian never listened. He clung to his own ways, no matter how many times Caleb spoke of breaking up, of tearing apart the contract. If someone so stubborn didn't have me, Caleb thought bitterly, how could he ever survive? That thought alone made him falter, made him suddenly not want the Caleb in his dream to destroy that rose after all. Because, at the very least, there had been moments of happiness between them. Adrian was relentless. That's why Caleb had once loved him with such fiery intensity, even as he abandoned him again and again. Those clear, earnest eyes would always be waiting, watching him, until Caleb returned, taking him away. Adrian was clumsy, and yet he always found ways to express himself with the simplest, most sincere gestures. Gestures that made Caleb want to call him a fool, yet left his throat aching, his eyes stinging. Without Caleb, how would Adrian live? The thought struck him with sudden clarity. He had countless chances to end it all, tear apart the contract, crush the rose. He wasn't that poor boy anymore. He had power, wealth, choice. But why? Why hadn't he? "The flower is beautiful." The sound of his own younger voice snapped Caleb from his spiral. He looked, and saw his younger self speaking the familiar line. But before the words could finish, young Adrian suddenly stood. "You're here." His voice was bright, joyful, overflowing with excitement that cut across young Caleb's words. Adrian didn't run to him. He threw himself into another boy's arms. A sweetness laced his tone, warm, honeyed, words that should have been spoken to Caleb but weren't. "Sorry, it's hot. You like it." The boy holding Adrian was flushed, awkward, his hearing aid glinting under the moonlight. He fumbled, carefully pulling out a bundle of Odin he had been guarding in his arms. I told my mom. She likes you too, Adrian. Let's go home." Home. Caleb's heart cracked. What home? What other home could Adrian possibly have except the one he gave him? He wanted to shout, but no sound came. He wanted to stop them, but his body wouldn't move. He could only stand frozen, watching with eyes burning as Adrian and the other boy leaned into one another, their figures shrinking in the distance. Shrinking, until they became nothing but snowflakes, two fragile specks drifting, dissolving into the vast earth below. Caleb jerked awake. His head was on his desk. He had fallen asleep. And there, lying in front of him, was the notice. All night he had studied it, turning it over, examining every detail, desperate to find signs of forgery. There were none. It was real. It was Adrian's handwriting. Caleb's throat went dry. That dream clawed its way back, sharp and merciless. Caleb's throat went dry. That dream clawed its way back, sharp and merciless. Suddenly, he pushed up from his chair, striding out of the study with urgency. As he walked, he fumbled for his phone, dialing a number. "Hello, James?" On the other end, a groggy voice yawned. "Big brother? I just got off the night shift, was dozing." Caleb's voice was hoarse, strained. "Help me check my lover's medical records." "Your lover?" James's tone turned puzzled. "Who are you talking about?" Caleb froze. Silence stretched. At last his voice dropped to a whisper. "Adrian Vale? His medical records." I rubbed my temples. I hadn't expected the job to be as a caregiver. Harold had put it bluntly. You've got the patience for that kind of man. You'd make a fine caregiver. He'd owed the Alaric family a favor. Now it was my turn to repay him. Besides, I was practically growing mold at my parents' place. It wasn't healthy to stay there any longer. The Alarics looked well-resourced. Everything about the house spoke of means. Mr. and Mrs. Alaric themselves were kind, their faces familiar, and their voices gentle. Still, there was something about them that tugged at my memory, like a half-remembered portrait I couldn't quite place. "Little Adrian," Mrs. Alaric cooed as she patted my hand. "Our boy can get hot-tempered. When he flies off the handle, he's like a stubborn mule. You must run quick if he gets like that. Call Aunt Bi to give him a sedative, and it'll be fine." Her smile was warm as she spoke. Alaric tried to smile, but it came out stiff, more uncanny than reassuring. I nodded, uneasy. I'd learned that being a caregiver didn't mean giving your life away, right? "He's actually home today," Mr. Alaric continued. "I'll have someone call him down so you two can meet." A servant left and returned quickly, murmuring something at Mr. Alaric's ear. "He's here, but he won't come down to meet us," Mr. Alaric muttered in annoyance, loud enough for me to hear. "Seems this young master is difficult to handle." A few minutes later, footsteps came from down the hall. The door swung open. He stood there. Familiar face. Ethan Alaric. Paint splattered on his clothes and his skin, bright, messy colors. Dark circles pooled beneath his eyes, telling me he hadn't slept. He looked surprised to see me, his eyes widening, and then he slammed the door shut with a clatter. Footsteps receded into the house. Mrs. Alaric laughed, a little forced. "Adrian, please stay for lunch. We've almost finished." We saw Ethan again at the dining table. He'd showered and changed into clean clothes. The agitation had drained from him, replaced by a calm, foggy peace. Without waiting for a servant to seat him, he came straight over and pulled out the chair next to mine. His scent filled the space around us, faint, warm. "Long time no see," I mouthed, smiling quietly, only to notice his hearing aid wasn't in. Ethan pressed his lips together, watching me with intent. Then he said, carefully reading my mouth, "Speak slowly, I can see." Could he read lips? I slowed my words and tried again. "Yes, long time no see." Ethan's gentle voice dissolved the edge of unfamiliarity that had been curling in my chest. It was like a quiet stream flowing through, soft and steady, and for the first time since stepping into this strange house, I felt a sliver of ease. Every time, he was always the one to show up when I felt alone. And yet, no matter how many times he arrived, a small, stubborn voice inside me kept whispering, "I've forgotten something. Someone important." Ethan Alaric went with me to my follow-up appointment today. As soon as we stepped outside, I spotted a young man standing beneath the tree. September, the season of osmanthus blossoms. In Locust City, the rains had been heavy, and after the storm, countless golden petals were scattered across the ground. I walked side by side with Ethan, my shoes pressing into the damp petals as we moved down the street. The sky was washed clean, a pure, crystal blue. A soft breeze carried the faint, sharp tang of alcohol through the air. "How have you been feeling lately?" Ethan asked, his gaze drifting to the dark circles beneath my eyes. I frowned slightly. Maybe it's because my mind has finally calmed down. The body's defenses, they've started to slip. I've been dreaming more often. Dreams, they always pulled me back into the past. Fragments I had forgotten, or perhaps chosen to forget. From distant childhood to the present day, faces blurred, voices hazy. No matter how many times I dreamed, it was always the same. A stage play unfolding before me, and me, forever standing in the farthest corner, unseen. And then, Ethan's voice was quiet. I didn't think before answering. "I dreamed of you." The moment I realized what I'd said, Ethan had already leaned closer. His eyes curved like crescent moons, and with absolute seriousness, he whispered, "I heard you. You dreamed of me." That night came rushing back, the last dream. I was back at the door, crouched low, watching as everyone gathered for Simon Vale's birthday banquet. Laughter spilled from the brightly lit hall. No one noticed me there. No one, until I heard my name. I turned. It was Ethan. A boy then, standing before me, reaching out his hand. "I came to play with you." His fingers wrapped around mine, warm and sure, leading me forward. Onto the stage. And there they were, so many people, eyes gentle, watching me with warmth. After 24 years, I had finally walked to the very center of my own stage. I looked at Ethan. My hand rose almost without thought, cupping his face, holding him still as I searched his eyes. His pupils trembled. He didn't pull away. Instead, color flooded his cheeks, his lashes fluttered, and then his eyes drifted shut. The heady scent of osmanthus filled the air, dizzying. My gaze lingered on his soft, damp lips as I leaned closer, heart pounding. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The shout struck me like a whip. I jerked back, my eyes snapping upward, to an angry face I hadn't expected to see. Caleb Monroe. I narrowed my eyes, matching him at last with the name whispered by friends. Caleb looked worse than before. Thinner, unshaven, exhaustion carved deep into his features. His clothes hung loose, inadequate against the weather. His eyes were rimmed red, burning as they fixed on me. His hand trembled as he opened it. A ring lay in his palm. "You win, Adrian," his voice cracked. "Let's go get treatment. Let's finally be together." I lowered my gaze to the ring, and then my mind roared, exploding with a thunderous hum. I took the bouquet Caleb offered. Joy unfurled in my chest like fireworks, bright, sudden, impossible to contain. For the first time, I believed someone had finally seen me. After I met Caleb, my life began to fill in the empty spaces. My parents, my brothers, they started to notice me too. Sometimes they would mention Caleb in conversation, and I would answer without hesitation. Caleb is a good man. He's a very good friend of mine. Back then, I didn't understand the faintly amused smile on Simon Vale's face. Only later did I learn it was another of fate's small cruelties, the kind that turns you into a joke for others, a story told at someone else's table. Still, I refused to build walls. Simon weighed pros and cons and gave Caleb the occasional sweetness to keep him dangling. It was a calculated kindness, nothing more. And yet beneath it all, I realized the truth about myself. I loved Caleb. Not as a friend. Not merely as a warm presence at my side. I loved him with the kind of clumsy, stubborn certainty that had no escape clause. In the hardest year, when even Caleb faltered and walked away, I watched him drunk and hollow in our cramped rented room, and despite everything, I reached out my hand. The same way he had once reached out to me when I had crouched at the villa gate, invisible and cold. After that, our days improved, bit by bit. Caleb learned to play the part of a partner. He learned how to surprise me and how to care. When he ran a fever and mumbled my name in that fevered haze, when he clutched my sleeve and whispered, "I only have you, Adrian," I believed him in that moment. I had him, and he had me. However mismatched the truth of it all might be. He was my reckless choice. I was his measured result. If the outcome was right, that is what mattered. I tightened my hands around his, closed my eyes, and let the world fall away. When I opened my eyes, the room felt taut, like the air itself was holding its breath. A doctor with dark circles under his eyes. Caleb Monroe, his face drawn and unreadable, and Ethan L. Eric, sitting beside me, silent and steady. I wanted to close my eyes again, but the doctor caught the movement with a soft, surprising "ah!" He moved like a quick fish through the tense space, weaving past the two men in a cluster of equipment until he stood at my bed, smiling in that practiced, reassuring way. "Well, you're awake, little patient," he said, then checked the scans. "Looks like your brain's defense finally let go. You overwhelmed yourself for a moment and passed out. Your memory should be mostly back now." I pressed my hand to my temple and whispered, "I'm not sure, but I remember a lot." Ethan kept his head bowed, black hair falling over his eyes. He didn't look at me. I tried to pull my hand away, only to find his grip iron strong. He wouldn't let go. "Adrian?" Caleb's voice was low when he called my name. "Do you remember me?" Under his burning gaze, I nodded. Thank God," he breathed, a string of words like a prayer. He moved toward me, half kneeling, and from his pocket produced a tiny velvet box. When he opened it, a ring waited inside. Familiar, the other half of the pair I once designed. "I brought one too. I'll never take it off again," Caleb said, voice trembling. The ring shone on his left hand. I paused, then simply said, "No." His smile froze. For a moment he looked lost, as if I'd removed his ground. Then, as if stumbling through a rehearsed speech, he pressed on. "If you don't trust this, let's rewrite the contract. This time, no backing out. Let's make it for life. We can get married abroad. Many countries allow same-sex marriage." "Caleb?" I cut him off. "Legend says there's a vein of love that runs from the left ring finger straight to the heart." My eyes found his. "Your heart isn't here." His hands clenched the bed sheet so hard the fabric creased. "No, it can't be over like this. We've wasted so many years. How can you just give up? I've cut ties with Simon. I stopped talking to him. Can't we start over?" Start over. Our beginning had been a mistake. Our every meeting a misstep guided by other people's hands. I sighed, the sound small in the sterile room. My heart isn't with you either. How could we possibly start again? Under the blanket, Ethan's fingers tightened around mine. At last, he lifted his head. I saw his eyes then, clear, gentle, but now edged with something fierce and possessive. For the first time, his kindness looked like a vow. I heard it, Ethan said. Seasons turned. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. The cycle carrying us forward. Autumn slipped away quickly, and only when the first snow fell did winter finally announce itself in full. I had just left a meeting when my phone buzzed. My mother's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I felt something like nostalgia. Time had raced since I left home. I reached up and caught a drifting snowflake on my palm, then answered the call, my first call from her in 3 years. Hello, I said. Adrian. Her voice sounded tired. You haven't come home lately. I didn't meet her question directly. Instead I asked, is something wrong? Everyone at home misses you, your brothers too. Come back for the new year. I fell silent. Faces in my memory, my adopted brother, Simon Vale, had already blurred at the edges. Did they miss me? I wasn't sure. No, I'm doing well now, I said finally, soft and steady, and I hung up. 3 years into my career, I'd become a registered architect, a core member of my firm. Work filled my days and introduced me to interesting people who called me gentle, attentive, reliable. The most out-of-character thing I did? At a whim, I agreed with Ethan Alaric to go to England and register our marriage. We even held a ceremony. Is your ring on today? Ethan's voice arrived with his umbrella, a familiar presence. I held my hand up. Of course, Master Painter Ethan. I teased. He smiled, kissed the shell of my ear, and murmured, I'll check it later. I'm always ready, I answered. Extra, Ethan Alaric's notes. What Adrian had forgotten, I still remembered. That villa was my family's. I sat in my room with my parents shut out, shouting into silence. It was useless. I was a deaf child in a hearing world. In middle school, my pride was raw. I resisted going. Everyone looked at me the same way, like I was broken. Doctors said it could be fixed. I didn't believe them at first. Yet on the days I refused school, I noticed Adrian. He was quiet, almost mute, and I thought he must be as miserable as I was. I began watching him from my window, planning a way to talk. When I finally had my chance, I found him gone. Days passed. My mother moved us for my hearing. I told myself I would find him again, an obsession that burned, a steady hunger. When I finally had him, I clung. I handled his gifts, intercepted his love letters, driving away anyone who thought they had a claim on him. Adrian would sometimes pat my chest, teasing me softly. You really can't hear, can you, baby? After my surgery, I heard almost normally. But I let him believe I was still fragile, still in need of his protection, because I wanted something deeper from him. Say you'll love me forever. Promise me you'll love me more than anyone. I breathed into his ear. I will always love Ethan Alaric the most. I promise. The world burst into color. Fireworks in my head. He'd said it. I laughed under the blush in his eyes and demanded, say it again. I won't accept your promise only once. The night stretched long and bright. The end.